wants to have that relationship ongoing. He was the curate at St. Peter's for many years. But we love this guy and we bless him. So give him a good listen. Tell him what he says afterwards is really good. Whatever he says, okay? Church discipline.
Is that better? Can you hear me now? Brilliant. I'm kind of slightly worried that John might be bugging my house, actually, because some of the things that you've said, in fact, everything that's been said today feeds into what I'm talking about. You've almost done my talk for me. He talked about telling stories, and we've heard some stories. I'm talking about stories. You talked about the everyday, and I'm talking about everyday miracles. And you talked about being filled up with wine, and I'm going to talk about that as well. So how's this? Amazing. So I wonder how many of you would be happy to say that you have experienced a miracle. Yeah, there's a few show of hands. I know. You know, we're in holy company here, clearly, and we've heard some amazing stories already. So it may be that there's a disproportionate number of us who have experienced a miracle of some sort here in this room. It might also be, though, of course, that you haven't experienced a miracle at all yet. Despite asking for it, despite praying for it, maybe even begging for it occasionally, begging God for it, maybe over a long period of time. Maybe you are here this morning in part because you're still waiting for God to do a miracle in your life. And how many people have you met in your day-to-day life, at work, in your neighbourhood, in your own family perhaps, who are also just crying out for a miracle, for something to dramatically change for the better in their lives, to see God really at work? That's just what we want as Christians, isn't it? We want that to be seen, God making a change in everybody's lives. When I put my mind to it, I've witnessed several amazing miracles, acts of healing and answers to prayer, situations resolved, but it's hard at first to pinpoint miracles in my own life. You know, I mean miracles that have happened to me directly. In fact, if I was really honest, I'd say that often God seems to be playing a game of hide and seek with me. He pops up when I least expect it, calling out to me, and then just as elusively, just as often he's elusive, he's quiet, he's hard to find. Does that sound in any way familiar to some of you? This is part of the challenge of a life of faith, isn't it? Keeping that faith through all of life's highs and lows, its thrills and spills. The good and the, well, frankly, sometimes pretty rubbish too. When it can be hard to see God doing what we so desperately want him to do, at times like those, miracles can seem almost preposterous. So that's why I thank God for communities of faith like Life Church, like what we've heard this morning, because it's in community that we grow and maintain faith together. It's here that we can support each other and share our experiences of God, and we can do that safely and we can do that creatively because we have that trust. Whatever that experience has been, what we do is we just tell stories. They're so important, stories. Through them we encourage each other, and we can start to share those stories in our day-to-day life with those outside the church. It's great hearing your stories here in church. So much better to hear those stories outside church where people can be amazed by these things that happen to us, seemingly tiny things, but with great meaning. Telling stories is really, really important. It's the heart of evangelism, and it's the heart of the mission of the church, just simply telling a story. You know, you can't go too far through the Gospels without encountering some sort of miracle of some sort. But we still have to deal with the fact that sometimes the miracles we read about and share with others can be, well, they can be salt in the wound of those whose hopes, sometimes desperate hopes of a miracle, do remain unfulfilled. For example, in Matthew 9, we read about a little girl being raised from the dead. But since then, of course, millions of faithful praying parents around the world have grieved lost children without a miraculous happy ending. In Matthew 14, we read about fish and bread being multiplied. But since then, how many millions have died of hunger? However, if we choose to be sceptical about miracles and choose not to believe in them as most of society, I guess, does, then first of all, if you're sceptical, you avoid some of these problems. But you then have an even bigger one. Your world is suddenly significantly reduced. It lacks these important elements: life, spirit, hope, meaning, reason. You live in a place where the impossible always remains, just impossible. And a place where God's existence doesn't seem to make that much difference. But what happens to us when we open our hearts and minds and we actively choose to dream dreams about miracles really happening in our lives, in the world, and in the lives of those around us? When we actively seek the miracle, sometimes in the seemingly mundane. Well, what happens is it starts to shake up our normal assumptions. And those who hear us tell those stories are even more dumbstruck by what they hear. They inspire our imaginations, and we start to see something different for the future. We start to reframe a whole paradigm, our whole understanding of ourselves and God and the world and how they're connected and interconnected. And to me, I don't know to you, that just sounds kind of miraculous in itself. Just a story to share with other people. If we think about Jesus' first miracle in John's Gospel, that's the wedding feast at Cana. John says this was the first of the signs by which Jesus revealed his glory. And it's such a weird miracle when you think about it, isn't it? It's a miracle in which Jesus he just lets everybody at the wedding have a really great time and an awesome party. Basically, they all just get blind drunk, I imagine, with all this amazing water that's turned into wine. So it can't just be about the miracle. It can't just be about the thing itself, is it? It's not about the wine in this story. It's about what these miracles, these little nudges, these stories, what they point to, what it reveals about God, and something really important, that God's desire is to make the mundane spectacular. So here's a couple of questions that we can go away and ask ourselves, having heard all these stories today and worship together. In what ways are our lives, our church, our community, like a wedding banquet that's run out of wine? What are you personally running out of? And what are the stone containers of your day, these things that were filled with water and turned into wine? What are the stone containers of our days? What's empty and dry in our life at the moment? And what would it mean for them to be filled? What would it mean for Jesus to find new purpose for us, to change our water into wine? What might it look like if God saved the best for us? Like he made the water into the best wine, not the rubbish wine. He made it into the very best. Do you remember? What would it be like if God saved that best for us at the end? It's in doing this, in answering these sorts of questions and sharing the answers with each other and those who we meet and spend time with outside of church, that we can repurpose an amazing but somewhat even mundane miracle story that might have happened to us in our lives in the week that's just gone. And we can turn it into something that can inspire us to new ways of thinking, acting, leading, into leading a new, purposeful way of life. You see, miracles, they just come in all shapes and packages, don't they? So when I think about it like this, actually I see that God has indeed performed numerous miracles in my life. He's given me purpose and drive. He's given me a family, the ability to care and to love, to seek and continue to seek for Jesus, and ultimately to trust in him for everything, to let the Lord take a hold of my life, take it in his hands. As John said, I've changed all sorts of journeys in my life as God has prompted and pushed me and pulled me and kicked me sometimes as well. And I've been given this miraculous gift to go with it. He's given me you guys. He's given me, hopefully, a new church community, St Margaret's in Southsea, which is just round the corner from where I live. I went there last Sunday, and they were amazing. It was great. Mark, who I just happen to work with, who comes and leads worship here occasionally, Mark Hayward, he goes there and leads worship as well. And it's literally 5 minutes from where I live. You know, God's given me this miracle as well. And it's through all these simple stories that he's restored in me hope and faith. And I think he can do the same for you. There are miracles of all types. Perhaps they're miracles that you too have experienced. The simple, everyday miracle of God's love and his value of us. Simple storytellers like you and I have seen empty vessels being filled and transformed into amazing things, have seen fear being replaced with joy and pleasure in the grit and mess of life. We've seen anxiety and fear fade, and we see faith and courage grow. That's why we're here. That's why Life Church is here. And that's why we need to keep telling these stories. And why our stories, your stories, need to be shared again and again, far and wide, in your communities, in your neighbourhoods, at work, wherever, in your families. It's the best evangelism you could ever do. So whether we've experienced dramatic miracles in our lives or we're just still waiting, in the end, it's all about faith and the waiting and hoping together, telling our stories far and wide. That's what I think truly can work wonders and miracles. Thank you. Amen.